Qinghai, Mr. President, and this Oxford Union, what an honor. My friends, ladies and gentlemen, scholars, professors, students, they say that you only speak at the Oxford Union twice. Once on your way up and once on your way down. Well, it's a pleasure to be back here today, really. Thank you for confirming that, Qinghai. But seriously, it is a real honor. This was one of the first places I spoke at after returning to the UK as ambassador. I was here early 2019. It is a storied venue, and I hope I can do justice to some of those very distinguished speakers who have come before me over the 2 centuries you have been doing this here in this hall. In fact, I took a quick look at your schedule here, and just this month, only this month, I am in very fine company, whether with Joe Kennedy III, Lord Rowan Williams, or John Simpson, or indeed Dame Olivia Newton-John and Kevin Bacon. What a formidable and intriguing lineup. What a wonderful privilege for students here, for you. I only hope I shall be as successful in capturing your attention. But before I do that, I try to do that, let me first thank the organizers, the Oxford Union, and express my gratitude for you coming here tonight, and for my family, my wife, my son Saeed, and my daughter Alma, for joining me. This is the first time. It's a great honor. Usually they run away from their father. And I thank you all in attendance, and I look forward to your questions after my introductory remarks. Now, I am going to try to shock you a little right from the outset. And I want to suggest to you that despite all you hear and all that you read or see, the issue of Palestine is really quite simple to resolve. Simple, you might well ask. More than 100 years of simple. Yes, it is simple. First, though, we need to diagnose the problem properly. The problem is this: for more than 100 years, the Palestinian people have been denied our rights. This injustice lies at the heart of our cause. We have been denied our rights as individuals, rights such as the right to security, personal security, family security, right to return to our own properties, homes, farms. Those are individual rights. We have also been denied our rights as a people, our collective rights. Rights to freedom, self-determination as a nation. Right from the beginning of the Balfour Declaration 104 years ago. By the way, we commemorated the 104 years ago only this month, which was issued, the Balfour Declaration of the British government of the time, was issued on the 2nd of November 1917. Right from the beginning, the Balfour Declaration, the indigenous population of Palestine has been treated with colonial contempt. Thus, the UK supported a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, even though at the time, in 1917, the Jewish presence there was, in comparison to the native population, minimal. There was a caveat in that declaration that this national home should not prejudice the civil and religious rights of the non-Jewish population. Please take a moment to think about that. So all of a sudden, we who have lived there for generations, millennia, Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, all the history and the roots have been turned only in name as a non-Jewish population. To promise a land that was not British to start with, to a group of people who did not live on it, as if it was not bad enough, but to acknowledge and dismiss the native population as one deserving only civil and religious rights. And therefore, we were meant only to have the right to pray, to access our holy places. And then deny us our identity, who we are, by describing us merely as non-Jewish population. This is the heart of our issue that lives with us until today. This is the heart of the ethnic discrimination. And that is exactly what it was. One group of people were seen to have full rights, another group of people were not, since then. And that, of course, laid the seeds for everything that was to come. British mandate of Palestine, Britain took over Palestine short after the Balfour Declaration from 1918 all the way to 1948. That laid the seeds for the 1948 Nakba catastrophe, when the majority of the Palestinian people were displaced intentionally and forcibly removed from our lands and homes, including my own parents. That's why I was born in a refugee camp. Never to be allowed to return and still, until now, languish in their third or fourth generations as refugees. That also laid the seeds for the 1967 occupation of the rest of historical Palestine and a subsequent settlement project that consistently considers military occupation and land grab as a legitimate object for conquest. All the way to only last year, 2020, the ultimate deal, remember the Trump deal that he offered for Israel and Palestine? Which echoed the Balfour Declaration. Did not see us, the Palestinian people, as a people with rights to self-determination, statehood, equality. The Balfour spirit is still alive, my friends. Today, alive. Not only in Israeli practices, but among international actors. All of these could only be conceived if you somehow feel the land's indigenous population is not deserving of full rights. That's the heart of it. From when that declaration was issued until this very moment. So let's not confuse ourselves with dispute of territory, disagreement, peace processes. This is the heart of it. So my friends, all of those and all of these issues also point us towards solutions. It's not just describing the problem. What I just described point us towards solutions and outcomes. We have been back and forth over this so many times that people seem to forget that any sustainable end result has to do just one thing. It has to uphold the basic rights of all equally. That's it. That is it. Uphold the basic rights of all equally. Now, since the Israelis enjoy their full rights already, and they do, what is really meant is that the Palestinian people need to also enjoy our full rights. That is what is missing. Simple, straightforward, without having to confuse everybody about history. Now note, please, that I am not talking here one or two state solutions. This is on purpose. Before 1988, the official position of the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, which I represent, was for a single democratic state on all the territory of the historic Palestine. It was the intervention of international players, especially Europe and the US, that convinced the PLO at the time that it would secure, that is the international community, secure the support of towards a two-state solution. Should we, the Palestinian people and leadership, adopt the internationally endorsed, espoused two-state solution? So it did, the PLO did, declaring statehood on the 15th of November, almost exactly 33 years ago, declaring a state in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza. That is the 1967 boundaries, or a 22% of historic Palestine. Negotiations with Israel followed, some in the open, some in secret. Short after that 1988 declaration, starting in Madrid, if some of you study history. A peace process even came out of the Oslo talks, which was secret at the beginning, that saw the PLO recognize the state of Israel on the 1967 borders. Israel, my friends, never reciprocated that recognition. We never got a recognition back of the state of Palestine. Then two states recognize each other, and then they talk about how to sort differences. And the rest should have been history, but it wasn't. I remind you, my friends, of this history as a way to show that the shape of a solution is not as important as its content. And that content must include the fulfillment of the rights of the Palestinian people on our own land, collectively, rights that I have mentioned just earlier, freedom, self-determination, and individually, to return for refugees, to security, to a pursuit of prosperity and opportunity. This can be done in two ways. It can be done in a two-state outcome. It can be done in a one-state outcome. And it can be done in such a way that both Israelis and Palestinians can enjoy free and secure lives, either together or as neighbors. So what is the problem then, if it's that easy and that simple? The problem is this, my friends. For too long, Israeli politicians has convinced themselves and convinced many international actors that this is a zero-sum game. A zero-sum. Let me remind you, my friends, that the current government, like the previous several governments under Benjamin Netanyahu, is openly opposed to Palestinian statehood, publicly. They say it day in and day out, including the current Prime Minister. This is, after so many years of a failed peace process, can only mean one thing. Israeli governments believe that either Israelis have full rights or Palestinians have full rights, but that both cannot enjoy their rights on this land at the same time. A zero-sum. Indeed, if you look at the history, it is clear that Israel has always considered this as a zero-sum from the very beginning. From the 1948, this thinking led to the mass ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from our homeland. That's a zero-sum. Ethnic cleansing is a zero-sum. In 1967, it led to the occupation of the rest of Palestine and the imposition of military rule on the people on those areas. Today, it is a broad assault that covers almost every aspect of our lives. Every aspect. In occupied East Jerusalem, my friends, Israel uses its courts to evict people from their homes. I'm sure you are following the Sheikh Jarrah and the Silwan eviction process. It builds settlements to control the city and change its geography. Israel applies certain laws in Jerusalem that apply only to the indigenous Palestinian population. These make it harder for them to survive in their own city, and near impossible for them to leave if they ever want to return. In the rest of the occupied West Bank, Israel imposes control with a legal system that allows it to detain, kill, with full impunity. They can actually detain you without charge. They call it administrative detention for a long time. And this goes without scrutiny, as well as a network of military checkpoints dotted all over the West Bank, crisscrossing the occupied territory and restricting severely the free movement of the native population. I hope some of you would go and visit and see that severe control of the lives of the population, the indigenous population. It builds, that is Israel, settlements that take away land from the local population, non-stop, and renders the rest of the Palestinian territory simply non-contiguous. Settlements are, my friends, at the very heart of it. Settlements is a military deployment. They are there to divide and conquer and to control the high ground. They take over the high mountains. And of course, they are there to lay claim to the land itself. So this is not just a temporary exercise. They consolidate the occupation. They are war crimes under international law, very well defined as war crimes. In the occupied Gaza Strip, meanwhile, my friends, the Israeli zero-sum approach means the imposition of a draconian blockade on 2 million people that leave them on the brink of a wholesale humanitarian catastrophe, disaster, with brackish water, no sewage system, unreliable power supply. People there in Gaza, actually I was born a refugee in Gaza myself, are largely unable to travel for any reason. And the Strip itself is unable to build a normal economy, since everything that needs to be imported or exported must go through Israeli ports, controls, checkpoints. And Israel is heavily restricting the types of materials and goods that come in or indeed out. The West Bank and Gaza need to be one territory whereby trade can move freely. That has not been the case for many, many years, at least since 16 years ago. So my friends, those are the realities that we face daily. And it is important to pinpoint them, because sometimes people, jump into conclusions. It is a harsh reality, softened only by our sense of hope and a firm determination that one day we will enjoy our full rights and we will live free and equal to everyone else. Because it does not have to be a zero-sum game, my friends, we believe. It does not have to be a zero-sum. There is a win-win. If we all had equal rights in one state, that is not a zero-sum. If we decided to divide the land into 2 states along the lines agreed about by the international resolutions, both equally independent and sovereign, that is not a zero-sum game. Of course, none of this is a zero-sum. But like I said before, I am here less concerned with the shape of the outcome. It seems clear that today the international support for the 2-state solutions, 2-state outcome, which once seemed to be clear, has dwindled dramatically over the years. Netanyahu worked hard to this end, and Donald Trump aided him every step of the way. But even before them, the lack of enforcement by the international community, especially when it comes to the Israeli settlement project I just described, suggests that that support was always at best tepid, because the settlement project has been ongoing since 1967. Tepid. Today, it is almost even hostile in some quarters of the world. We have adopted a strategy of non-violent actions, my friends, to achieve our rights through peaceful and legal means. Yes, today the UK tells us, the government of the United Kingdom tells us, we should not go to the International Criminal Court. We should not take our complaints to the UN Human Rights Council. And we should not expect support for our bid to launch an international peace conference. What are we supposed to do if you cut off all these avenues? At the same time, we are told that the UK will not ban settlement products. The UK describes these settlements clearly as illegal. So does the ivory products, illegal. So the UK bans ivory products. You don't just say they are illegal. We have been demanding a ban of these illegal products because these products are produced in illegal entities, on stolen land, use stolen water. The UK will not even sanction British companies working in these illegal settlements, even though the position is very clear. We've just been following a case for JCB, you know, the big company that produces these heavy machines, because these machines are being used as we speak to destroy, demolish Palestinian homes and farms. And by the way, there was a government watchdog that found them to be not exactly in the ethical side, and there is an investigation going on right now. But we need the full force of the law to be enforced, if we mean it, rather than just have it as a lip service. And my friends, the UK will not also recognize the state of Palestine. They keep saying, we support a two-state solution. Thank you. We also support a two-state solution. But if you support two states, you are ought to recognize the two states, right? It only makes sense if you want to level the field, if you want to show your seriousness about your policy. Even though 2/3 of the world's countries have already recognized the state of Palestine, and the British Parliament itself voted in 2014 overwhelmingly to recognize a Palestinian state. Our conclusion, my friends, can only be that international actors are no longer serious about two states. Can we have any other conclusion? They are not, international actors, our international partners are not really serious about their own policy of two states on the 1967 borders. Whatever international law stipulates and whatever international resolutions call for, they are not serious. And these resolutions are voted for by these international actors themselves. They are tabled even and drafted by these international actors themselves. But fine, tell us. We are at a point, a minute before midnight. Things are very critical back there. Tell us. Have the guts to come clean. Stop wasting your time and our time. That way we can adjust our strategy accordingly. It's been 30 years since the peace processes. Because that is what the peace process became. 30 years, rather than a roadmap to a resolution, it replaced, the peace process replaced resolutions. And in doing so, asked us to put our rights on hold indefinitely. So we should not demand or achieve our rights until the peace process has actually achieved its net result. So the peace process has become almost a contradiction with our own rights. And it's been going indefinitely. So people in Gaza should remain under siege. People in the West Bank should remain under the violence of the settler groups. People in Jerusalem should remain under the threat of their homes being taken away. The refugees should remain unable to go back to their properties and homes. We wait for a peace process. For a long time, this has been the case. Wait, next year, the year after, it will come. And therefore, we are saying today, really, that enough of that. Enough of that. We will not accept to live without rights any longer. Certainly not for peace processes as a theater. So, my friends, there is a clear international framework for a two-state outcome that, in theory at least, everyone supports. The peace process meant to get us there has failed because international actors lacked the necessary political will to see it through, to enforce its own rules. That primarily means holding Israel accountable for its transgressions of international law, especially settlements, for reasons that should be clear to everybody. Every brick that Israel built, every colonial settlement that is built in the occupied territories is further away from a two-state solution. And every step that goes unpunished is simply another sign, another incentive, another message for Israel that how many and how fast they continue doing it if there is no enforcement and no consequences. This is the key. So far, not Washington, not London, not Brussels has given any indication where that ceiling is. When do we say enough is enough? There's nothing left in the West Bank. The Israeli government is now building in the Kalandia airport, which is very close to Ramallah, which was one of the few places that are left to actually build for us an airport that connects the middle of the West Bank to the rest of the occupied territories. So, and to no one's surprise, Israel continues building settlements until today. So, everyone can see this quite clearly. There is no confusion about this. And still, no one is prepared to enforce the law. The law. But international law is important, my friends. This is my concluding part. International law, international legality, international legitimacy is important. Not just for us, the Palestinian people, not just for Palestine. There is a reason the United Kingdom was among the prime movers behind the rules-based global order back in the 40s. It saw, that is the United Kingdom, it saw clearly that absent such order, the horrors of the World War II might happen again. Never again, they said at the time. Never again. But now, as memories recede and complacency sets in, it seems many countries in Europe and beyond, including the UK and the UK government, want to only pay lip service to international law and legality. At least when a friend is being scrutinized. This is a dangerous game, my friends. A very dangerous game. A game done by very ambitious politicians. It is a dangerous game for you here, the youth of today, who will be bringing up your children, as I am bringing mine now, in that world of tomorrow. As if our generation has not left you enough to do with climate change, enough mess, I mean. And I attended the Glasgow summit of the climate change. Now you also have to contend with a world in which every tin-pot dictator, and would-be autocrat, thousands that with the right friends, all of them will be thinking, with the right friends in the right places, rules can simply be broken. This is the lesson for everybody. And there are so many of these tiny dictators who are just looking around. Rules can be broken. Rules are for the weak, they say. Personally, and as a Palestinian, as a diplomat, I am quite convinced, my friends, that turning our back on the global order is deeply retrograde. It's a retrograde step. It takes us back to a situation in which international relations are once again ordered only by the law of the jungle and the whims of the power. And we have seen that horror movie before. We warn that we have seen that horror movie before. Is that a world you want to live in, my friends? The future leaders of our world? Is that really a world you want to live in? Would you accept that kind of lawlessness in your own country? Why unleash it on the world? And if you don't want such a world, then you have to be serious about the global rules-based order. And I invite you to be, because this is the last we have that would protect all of us, that would regulate our relations. And if you are serious about the global rules-based order, this means that you have to also be serious about Palestine. And actually, a lot of people are serious about Palestine. People everywhere, my friends, and that what gives us hope is that Palestine has become a global issue. Think back to May this year and the demonstrations against Israel's assault on Gaza, and before that, the attempts to evict families from their homes in Jerusalem. There were protests everywhere, tens of thousands. No more than the UK, by the way, particularly London. And these demonstrations were primarily attended by and led by youth, you. This really gives us hope, truly gives us hope. If COVID has taught us that viruses do not respect borders, and we have all lived that experience, that awful experience of the last year and a half, viruses do not respect borders. If climate change, my friends, teaches us that we do not exist on this planet in isolation, that's the lesson. It teaches us a very clear lesson. We do not live in isolation. We cannot simply close that room and say we are protected. Let Palestine also teach us, all of us, that an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. That is the key lesson. As Desmond Tutu, my friends, who long ago called out Israel as an apartheid system, being built as an apartheid system, once said, those who turn a blind eye to injustice actually perpetuates injustice. That's what Tutu said. He added, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Similar words from another great leader, Martin Luther King, who said, in the end, and this is a saying I always remember, it always echoes in my head. What a powerful thing to say. Martin Luther King said, in the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies. but the silence of our friends. Don't be silent. Don't turn a blind eye. For the sake of Palestine, for the sake of the region and your world, and for the future, your future, our shared future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Zomlot, for your opening remark. Well, I'm not passing any comment on your remark about how a guest speaker come to address the union twice ever, first time on their way in, second time on their way out. As an impartial and a neutral moderator of this conversation, I can assure you, when a guest speaker tomorrow, the Canadian psychologist and author, Dr. Jordan Peterson, coming to visit the union for his second time, I'll share your wisdom with him. And I'll see how he takes that. But we are grateful that you are able to come to speak to us again. The union is known as the last bastion of free speech. In addition to free speech, we're also a forum to have constructive and civil discourse. Have you seen there being any generational changes in public attitude towards the Palestine-Israel relations? And what roles do you think the higher education and our students have to play to make the conversation more civil and constructive?
A sea of change, my friend, between the new generation and the previous generations. And I think that's what explains to you the public opinion show of support in the last events of May, and before that and after that. Your generation is a little bit different than previous generations, I must admit. Number one, you are way more exposed, more traveled than all of your previous, your parents and grandparents. Number two, the internet has altered the way we know things, receive things, read things. Number three, after the internet came a new invention called social media, and I know all of you are extremely active on your Twitters and Facebook and Instagrams and what have you. I haven't gotten yet to the Saeed, what's the name of the program that has videos on it? Okay, TikTok. But those tools have been used by you, the youth, to actually show the truth, to reveal the situation. And I tell you, that has made a huge difference, because for many, many years, the truth has been concealed via a wall. That wall was traditional media, international traditional media. The big guys, without going through the list. They have not done us justice. For years, they have been portraying the situation, at best, as if there is some sort of equivalence and symmetry and balance between the two sides. I call it the two-sidism. So wherever you read an article, wherever you are interviewed, and I happen to be all the time in British media, American media, they start by asking you about the two sides. They focus on the Palestinian reaction rather than Israeli action. So for years, the media has literally blocked our story, our narrative. For years, they have used the wrong terminology. Like, when it comes to Palestinians, we are often described as gunmen. But when it comes to Israel, it's the Israeli Defense Forces. For God's sake, it's the other way around. We are not occupying anybody's land. We are not stealing anybody's land. We are killing nobody. Terminology matters. When they say settlements, for Western people, settlements is a positive thing. It's almost like a good thing. People come and settle. These are not settlements. These are illegal colonies. And the list, my friends, of the terminology goes on. Always being framed not in terms of rights, as I try to explain tonight, that this is a nation that has been under such injustice, oppression, that seeks its rights. No, that's not the narrative. The narrative is violence, terrorism, right? Why I'm saying this? Because luckily, Instead of having one ambassador to speak on behalf of Palestine, now we have 13 million ambassadors who are Palestinians, and we have tens of millions of ambassadors who are you. And I follow you. I follow many of your activism. Every one of you is a leader. Every one of you has a platform. Every one of you has a voice. And they could not cut our voices anymore. And that is what making the difference. The voices are being heard out there. One video in Sheikh Jarrah by one Palestinian goes viral. This was not available only 10, 15 years ago. Once I was at Harvard, and I spent a few years at Harvard as a scholar, visiting scholar, and I was, giving a talk, a lecture, and a student said, what are you going to do? That was already 10 years ago. What are you going to do, you poor Palestinians? America gives Israel F-35, the most sophisticated weaponry. And I found myself having my new iPhone at the time. It was number 4 or number 2, I can't remember. And I pointed my iPhone and I said, America gave us this. And all what we need is not weapons. We need the truth to be out. And I hope once the truth is out, your generation are going to force all of us into a solution that is really dignified and will put an end to it.
In your speech, I see there's a strong sense of frustration that the UK government hasn't quite fulfilled the responsibilities that the government has towards Palestine. You also stress that you have to be faithful in an international rule-based system, and the UK is a crucial player in that. What can we do to restore people's confidence in such a system? And do you think that system is still effective? If not, what else can we resort to?
Yeah, that's the question. And in a very straightforward answer, I don't have a magic solution, a magic answer, a convincing argument. Because unfortunately, while the powerful countries were the ones who created the international order, it is the same countries that are undermining that order all the time. So the weak, the underdog is expected to abide by these rules, but the strong is not expected to abide by them. This is the problem. The problem is not with the rules. The rules are very universal. Those are the rules that we need to keep and defend. Shared human values. What is the essence of the international global order? What is the essence of it? For those who study law, for those who study international law, the essence of it is the inadmissibility of acquiring land by force. Because if countries start occupying others' land, the Second World War and the First World War will repeat itself. But then around that main rule, there are many rules to regulate our relations. All these rules, all these conventions, all these agreements are excellent. The problem is not in the rules. The problem is in the enforcement. So what good if you have the best law in the UK and you don't have a very effective police? Here's the issue. Our global system lacks enforcement. So when you want to take Israel to the ICC to make sure that rules are enforced, you are blocked not only by Israel, but by these superpowers because they fear that if that is done to Israel, it will be done to them. So how do we solve it? I think your generation has a major responsibility to actually focus on the enforcement of international law, because that is going to be a difficult fight. I assure you it will be. It's not going to be easy. No, it ain't easy. But think of the alternatives. Think of the alternatives. And think what could happen if we continue undermining the only system we actually have. I don't want to remind you of the horror movies we have seen before, but there are moments in the last few years that we were almost at the brink of catastrophes. What I heard in Glasgow about the global warming is very serious. It's existential. I think we are at a snail pace to face up that challenge. You tell me, how can we face that challenge without international cooperation? How can we face that challenge without togetherness, all of us? How can we face our challenge if we don't accept the premise that we are in it together, we are in the same ship? How can we face that challenge if some countries can think they can get away with more pollutions? How can we just let the poorer be subjected to these consequences without the richer bearing the cost? These are the discussions. So I will end up by telling you, make that fight, my friend. Don't let go.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of horror stories and tragedies and conflicts, we've seen a lot in recent times, and the civilians with the casualty. Hezbollah and Hamas have often struck Israel, and most recently through their attack in Israel and Gaza Strip. Do you believe them to be freedom fighters or terrorists? And do you think they actually have advanced or maintained or even held back or undermined the causes for Palestinian sovereignty?
Well, this is not the question. I'm sorry to reframe your own question. The question is, why do we have groups like this? And this is why I said there was a lot of focus on the reaction, not the action, on the symptoms, not the disease. If we want to truly treat the situation, heal it, we need to focus on the root cause. The root cause of all this is the state of injustice, illegalities, military occupation, besiegement. And no matter how you deal with it, no matter how you look at it, no matter how much security apparatuses you deploy, military, wars, no matter what you do, without visiting and looking at the virus, you will not resolve it. Like a good doctor, I don't know if anybody of you study medicine here. Doctors do not start by healing the symptoms. So they don't look at the rash. They look for the real cause of why you have the symptoms. Why are you shaking? Why do you have fever? So your question is about the fever. My answer is about the virus.
It seems like you talk about the root cause is the state of injustices, and that results back to the international system. So we have to talk about some of the players, as you talk about, refer to as the Western countries. We have to think about United States. With Trump no longer in the White House, what do you make of Biden's performance? The public seems not to be convinced that he would treat the Palestinian-Israel issue as one of his priority. What do you say how the Biden administration would shape the peace process?
We are hoping. What we heard from President Biden is promising. He called our president and he said that he supports a two-state outcome, again, on the 1967 borders, that he thinks settlements are not only illegitimate, but a major obstacle on the way to that, or in the way to that. That he wants to restart our relations, reopen the Consulate General in Jerusalem, which is the US Consulate General, reopen the PLO office, which I used to head. By the way, our office was closed when I and my family used to live in Washington. And as a result, I had to leave the US. And I was reappointed to the UK. So I am enjoying the UK, and I say now I have one person to thank, that's Mr. Trump himself, for closing the office. But on a more serious note, all what we heard from President Biden is yet to be implemented. A year on, more than a year, and we haven't seen the Consulate General reopen. We haven't seen our office restated in Washington. We haven't seen a much more serious policy vis-a-vis the settlements. Settlements are mushrooming, the illegal settlements, unprecedented historic rates. So while on paper, in theory, we have heard what we want to hear, in practice, there is much to be desired.
Mm-hmm. On that note, I want to open up the discussion to our members. If you've got a question, please put your hand up and one of our committee members will come to you. The member over there, if you wait for the microphone and stand up to ask your question, please.
Hi, mine's a simple question. When does your president plan to hold legislative elections for the Palestinian Authority?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. Very soon, and it has to be very soon. We have many venues to actually resist the illegality, but one of the most important venues is the renewal of the democratic process. For me and for us, elections and democracy is not just a way to renew, and choose representatives. It is a resistance method, because nothing is more powerful than the legitimacy of your own people, that you are represented in one voice. We had issues with that over the last few years. Before that, actually, we were the luckiest and the proudest, if I may use that term, in being among the few who actually convene regular elections. Very democratic, as you know, and we pride ourselves with that. But over the last many years, we have run into an issue with the Hamas takeover of Gaza and the inability to convene elections in Gaza. And once we sorted that issue last year, we ran into a bigger issue of not being able to convene elections in Jerusalem because of an Israeli veto. And my friend, as much as elections are important, Jerusalem for us is Palestine. Jerusalem for us is our compass. It is our DNA. And it is very well defined in international law as an occupied city and must be the capital of the state of Palestine. So to run elections without East Jerusalem and our hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in East Jerusalem would mean that we would allow Israel to actually say, here you go, Jerusalem is no longer part of the Palestinian polity, part of the Palestinian population, part of the Palestinian territory. In light of the Trump move, declaring Jerusalem as unified, the capital of Israel, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, that move would have been absolutely catastrophic for us. And Israel did not veto our elections in Jerusalem by words, but by deeds. They arrested anyone who would dare to campaign, talk about elections, go back to the articles and the news. So we were faced with that challenge, that serious challenge. Yet, my friend, we must find ways. We must find ways with our international partners, with the region, with our own people to convene our elections as soon as possible. Delaying it does not serve us. It has been harming us. It's almost a it's a way to delay something that we desperately need. So hopefully we will soon do it.
Got the question. Got a question. Remember that wearing a face mask. Yeah. You're the female member in the face mask.
Could you stand up?
Yeah. I was going to ask, you briefly mentioned that, but do you think the media portrayal of Hamas in the past years, did it in a way detract from the tragedies that were happening in Palestine?
The media portraying of?
Hamas.
No, the media portraying of Palestine. Really, all of Palestine, not just Hamas, all of Palestine. Something that I tried to answer earlier, but it is a major problem. It's a major problem. This doesn't mean some groups do not commit mistakes. And, our strategy is very clear. We fully support peaceful struggle. And we have been engaged in a peaceful struggle, both at home and in the international arena. Going to the UN is a peaceful tool, I hope. Even though we have been resisted by countries like the US, but it's a peaceful tool. And we got our UN membership. Now, if you go to the UN, it has a tag, the State of Palestine. When we represented Palestine here in the UK, in Glasgow, the tag was the State of Palestine, because we are recognized by the majority of the world, and when we went for a vote, the majority of the world admitted us as a member of the UN. Observer member, non-voting member, but a member. So we do not condone any other method. Yet again, I repeat this, continuing to focus on the symptoms has gone on for almost 100 years. And it's gotten us nowhere. Nowhere. And I will repeat again and again and again and again. the source of all this, the action is not by the Palestinians. The action is by the illegality of our reality under occupation, under colonization, and what the world now is describing as an apartheid. If you go back to what the Human Rights Watch, and this is not a Palestinian organization, this is the most renowned international human rights organization based in New York and has offices worldwide. If you go back to Beit Salim, and this is not a Palestinian organization, this is an Israeli human rights organization, the most respected, renowned human rights organization in Israel. If you go back to the reports the last few months, you will see clearly that they now describe Israel as an apartheid state. Why? Why do they say that Israel has crossed? Because all the actions that have been accumulating have made that area controlled by one country that applies different rules and laws on different ethnicities. This is what the media need to be discussing. This is what the media is ought to be focusing on. And by the way, there are attempts, I'm sorry, I'm going to go on in this one sentence. There are attempts to always conflate the Palestinians with this group or that group. There are attempts to conflate issues. Okay, Hamas is part of the Palestinian people, but the majority of the Palestinian people are the nationalists, the non-violent, the ones who are helping us in our popular resistance, peaceful resistance. So also the media magnify certain aspects and undermine, block the 99% of the beauty of the Palestinian nation, of the beauty of our culture, of the resilience of our nation, of the Palestinian mothers surviving every day to send their kids to schools, not knowing if they will ever come back because of the settler violence and the checkpoints. You don't see this in your TV sets, do you? You don't. All what you see is Hamas, this, that, rockets. But the daily real struggle, survival, steadfastness, perseverance, creativity, you don't see. You don't see in the news that Palestine has one of the lowest illiteracy rate in the world. You don't see that Palestine has one of the highest PhD per capita graduates worldwide. Do they tell you that in the media? You don't see that positive side. All what the media wants to feed you is this group and that group. They don't tell you that we are Christmas land. You know, we are about to celebrate Christmas. And how much there is respect and celebration of that moment. For all us, Christmas for us is not a religious occasion only. It's a national occasion. They don't tell you the amount of respect between Muslims and Christians and Jews before all this mess began. The respect between religions and ethnicities. They don't tell you that the keys of the church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the most holy church on earth, you know that. The keys of that church has been held by a Muslim family for the last so many hundred years. That Muslim family go every morning and every evening to open it and close it and care for it. Do they tell you that? This is Palestine. This is the Palestinian people. But all what the media wants to feed is that one-sided angle and picture that does not really represent who we are and who we want to be.
Thank you so much for your answer. Dr. Zomlot, we are running out of time, but we can very quickly squeeze in one last question if you keep your answer succinct. And the member there on the front bench, yes.
Thank you very much. I have been to Palestine and I've traveled quite a bit around the West Bank. And something I came back with was I couldn't go to Gaza because of the security situation there. But do you see Hamas and Hamas's control over Gaza as well as its popularity as a hindrance to the creation of a Palestinian state under the leadership of your organization, the PLO? And where do you see the struggle for a Palestinian state going forward, considering these two different groups who are certainly competing against each other for control over the Palestinian state? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I see that to be a self-inflicted wound, a walking in a trap. I see what Hamas did to have really damaged our cause and our standings. the taking control of Gaza was absolutely against our national interest. I think unity must be achieved as soon as possible. I believe Hamas has played in an overall strategy, directly or indirectly, meant or not meant, of an Israel that wants to divide and rule, because successive Israeli governments have been using this, yet they have been maintaining the status quo of division and feeding it. Cash go to Hamas and to Gaza via Israeli crossings now, because they want to sustain the division. So I think the absolute national priority right now is that Hamas gives up its control of the Gaza Strip, that the one legitimate authority and the one legitimate representation is in service of our people everywhere, and then we can always sort our differences by dialogue. I believe the people of Gaza have suffered enough, including my own family and friends, and I think this should not be about who controls what, but this should be about how our people can be closer to achieving our national goals.
Thank you for your response. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Please once again join me to thank Dr. Zomlot for his visit.